I had been at my mother's bedside all night, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, listening to the monitors beep in rhythm with her fragile heartbeat. By the time morning came, exhaustion had settled into my bones like a heavy fog, and all I wanted was the comfort of my own home, the normalcy of our little life. The drive back felt endless, every red light stretching my anxiety tighter, and my mind wandered to mundane thoughts: coffee, the cat, my daughter's homework scattered on the kitchen counter. I didn't expect chaos. The moment I stepped through the front door, something felt off. The air smelled faintly of dampness, and there was a subtle, unnatural silence that made my skin prickle. I called my wife's name, expecting her to come bustling around the corner with a tired but warm smile. Nothing. Only the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. Then I noticed it. The basement door, normally left ajar, was firmly locked. My heart lurched, and a cold wave of panic washed over me. Where could she be? And why was the door locked from the inside? My thoughts scrambled as I ran my hand along the doorknob, testing it, hoping against reason that it would turn. A faint thump echoed from below, and my pulse quickened. My mind jumped to my daughter. Had she gone down there? Had something happened? I called for her, my voice quivering despite my attempt to stay calm, but only silence answered. The house, usually filled with the comfort of familiar sounds, now felt like a trap. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, every corner a possibility of dread. I sank into the couch for a moment, trying to steady myself, replaying my last conversations, any detail that might explain this. Nothing. My mind refused to settle. Anxiety clawed at me as I realized that my home, the one place I expected safety and familiarity, had transformed into a puzzle I had no key for. Something had shifted overnight. Something was terribly wrong, and I had no idea where to start. I pressed my ear against the basement door again, straining to hear, to understand. A muffled shuffle, almost deliberate, confirmed my worst fear. Someone, or something, was down there. My wife wasn't just missing. She was trapped or hiding, or worse. The knot in my stomach tightened as dread coiled around my thoughts. And in that moment, the ordinary world I had expected upon my return collapsed entirely. The questions multiplied. Why was the basement locked? Where was our daughter? And most terrifyingly, who had turned my life upside down while I was away? I felt the weight of helplessness pressing down, but beneath it, a spark of resolve ignited. I couldn't stay frozen. I had to know. I had to find them. Whatever it took, I needed answers. I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a metal crowbar that had been leaning against the wall, and my hands trembled as I wedged it under the basement door. Every second felt like an eternity, the air thick with tension, my mind racing through possibilities I didn't want to consider. Finally, with a loud snap and a jarring jolt, the door creaked open, revealing darkness and the faint scent of mildew. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, the dim light from the hallway stretching across the concrete floor. There she was, crouched in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes wide and unblinking. Her hair was disheveled, and there was a sheen of sweat on her forehead that betrayed both fear and guilt. The moment our eyes met, I felt a jolt of something I couldn't immediately name. Relief, shock, suspicion. Why are you here?" I whispered, my voice cracking despite my attempt at calm. She shook her head, avoiding my gaze, her lips quivering. I didn't mean for this," she stammered. Her voice was fragile, laced with panic, but every word seemed calculated to avoid the full truth. My confusion spiraled. I wanted answers, demanded clarity, but all I got were fragmented sentences and evasive looks. It was maddening. As I stepped closer, my eyes swept the small basement room. Stacks of unopened bills and envelopes caught my attention, hinting at financial matters I hadn't been privy to. There were receipts, bank statements, even documents with figures that didn't add up. My stomach twisted as I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It could be betrayal, both emotional and monetary. The panic in her eyes shifted the room's energy from fear to tension, an unspoken warning that whatever she had done, it ran deep. "What's going on? Tell me the truth," I demanded, my voice rising despite the careful restraint I tried to maintain. Her gaze finally met mine, fleeting and hesitant, before darting away again. She swallowed hard, and I could see the tremor in her hands. "I didn't want you to find out like this. Her words trailed off, leaving a heavier silence than any explanation could fill. I wanted to reach out, to touch her, to understand. But a rising anger and betrayal flared inside me. How could she have hidden this? And more importantly, why trap herself in the basement, leaving me to discover her in such a state? Every instinct screamed that there was more to this story, a web of secrets twisting around us both, threatening the fragile balance of our lives. Even in her fear, I could sense pride and defensiveness lurking beneath the surface. This wasn't just about a moment of panic. It was a pattern, a design, a hint at a larger scheme I had yet to uncover. I had walked into my own home seeking comfort, and found a puzzle that cut deeper than the hospital night I had just endured. And in that realization, a mixture of confusion, anger, and determination solidified inside me. I needed answers, and I wasn't leaving this basement without them. Panic hit me like a punch to the gut the moment I realized our daughter wasn't anywhere in sight. My eyes darted around the basement, then across the living room, scanning every corner, every shadow, every familiar nook that had once felt safe. Her small backpack lay abandoned by the couch, straps twisted and crumpled, a silent accusation that churned my stomach. My heart raced as I called her name, louder this time, my voice cracking with desperation. No response. Only silence answered, and that silence pressed down on me like a lead weight. I ran from room to room, frantically checking the bedrooms, her playroom, even the garage, but she was gone. Panic morphed into a creeping dread, the kind that makes every creak of the floorboard sound like a warning. I noticed a small piece of paper on the hallway table, a scribbled note in my wife's handwriting, vague and dismissive, that only deepened my unease. My mind replayed the past few months, the subtle changes, the unexplained trips, the half-truths that had once seemed minor, but now screamed of deliberate manipulation. Flashbacks surfaced in waves, arguments over money that had never been resolved, moments where I'd caught her eyeing my documents with a calculating look, the tension behind her forced smiles. Little by little, patterns emerged, revealing cracks I had ignored, trust I had misplaced. The realization that this was not accidental but intentional hit like a cold slap. My daughter's absence was no random misstep. It was part of a plan, and the thought made my chest tighten with fear and fury. I tried to piece together the sequence, retracing her recent activities. A torn page from her homework left in the kitchen, a toy out of place, her favorite snack still uneaten. Each clue felt small but significant, almost like a breadcrumb trail meant to provoke anxiety, to make me feel helpless. And yet the more I pieced together, the clearer it became. I had been underestimated. My wife had calculated every move, counting on me to be blind, to be slow, to be caught in my own exhaustion. Emotional turmoil twisted inside me. Fear for my daughter mixed with anger, betrayal, and a creeping sense of guilt. How had I not seen this coming? Every memory, every conversation I had brushed off now carried a hidden weight, a warning I had ignored. My mind spun with questions. Where had she taken our daughter? How long had this been planned? And most hauntingly, why? The answers eluded me, leaving me hollowed out yet desperate to act. Even in the fear and confusion, a spark of determination flared. I could not let this slide. I had to find her, to reclaim my child from the web of manipulation that had ensnared our home. The dread was suffocating, but beneath it, a clarity emerged. I was not powerless. This was a test, and I refused to fail. Every step I took now, every decision I made, would bring me closer to uncovering the truth and confronting the betrayal that had grown so silently around me. I returned to the basement, the weight of fear pressing down harder than before, determined to find anything that could explain the impossible. My eyes swept over every surface, scanning for overlooked clues. That's when I noticed a small stack of envelopes, shoved behind the utility shelf, almost hidden from view. I pulled them out one by one, the envelopes crisp, official-looking, each sealed with my wife's meticulous handwriting. As I tore the first open, a wave of disbelief washed over me. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, transfers I had never authorized, and dates carefully selected to coincide with times I was away at my mother's hospital. It all added up. I sank to the floor, letting the papers fall around me, feeling the room tilt with betrayal. Each discovery felt like another punch to my chest. Text messages, buried in my phone after a forced glance at her device, confirmed it. Secret conversations with unfamiliar numbers, discussions about money, custody, and insurance that excluded me entirely. Every word I read twisted the knife further. She had been planning this for months, weaving a web of deceit I hadn't even suspected. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the woman I knew with the one revealed in these documents. The wife who smiled at me at breakfast, the one who pretended to be exhausted with me by the bedside. None of it had been real. The shock was blinding, but amid the disbelief, a spark of clarity ignited. I realized something crucial. I had been underestimated. She assumed my exhaustion, my empathy, would leave me blind to her schemes. That miscalculation became my first advantage. Anger bubbled under the surface, sharp and consuming, yet I forced myself to think logically. I cataloged the evidence, memorizing the dates, the amounts, the code words in the messages. Each fragment revealed the meticulousness of her plan, but it also revealed cracks, small inconsistencies, moments where her arrogance had left openings. My perspective shifted. No longer was I the bewildered victim. I could see the battlefield, the patterns, the weak points she thought I'd never notice. The basement felt smaller now, suffocating with the weight of revelations, but also charged with possibility. I wasn't powerless anymore. Every secret unveiled, every hidden message discovered, became a tool. The panic that had paralyzed me hours ago transformed into focus, sharp and precise. I could feel the first stirrings of control returning, and with it, the knowledge that the next moves would be mine, not hers. For the first time since stepping into that house, I wasn't just reacting. I was planning, and she, confident in her secrecy, had just handed me the key to turn the tables. I didn't wait a moment longer. I found her sitting in the living room, her back rigid, hands folded tightly in her lap like a schoolgirl caught misbehaving. The faint light from the window hit her face, but it couldn't soften the cold, calculating look in her eyes. I dropped the envelopes and my phone onto the coffee table, letting the evidence speak before I did. "I know everything," I said, my voice low but steady, though my chest felt like it was about to explode. Her eyes widened just slightly. Then she leaned back and let out a soft, almost mocking laugh. "Everything? Or what you think you know?" she asked, tilting her head, the words dripping with disbelief. Her tone was designed to unsettle me, to make me doubt myself, but I wouldn't fall for it. "Not anymore." I stepped closer, feeling the anger build like fire under my skin. "Don't play games. I have your texts, your bank statements, the notes you left behind. Don't lie. Where's our daughter?" She flinched, just enough to betray her discomfort, but immediately regained composure. "I'm not going to tell you that. You'll only make it worse," she said, her voice a mix of fear and defiance. The refusal hit me like a brick wall. My heart sank, and frustration boiled over, sharp and raw. I've been blind and I've been patient, but no more. "You can't hide from this," I shot back, each word trembling with controlled fury. My mind raced with all the ways she had manipulated our home, twisted our life, and now she refused to give me even the smallest fragment of truth about our daughter's safety. Her eyes darted to the floor, and then to the window, avoiding mine, but the mask never faltered. "I told you I'm not going to explain. You'll just ruin everything," she whispered. But there was a tremor I hadn't noticed before. That tremor betrayed fear. Fear that I was catching up. Fear that the control she thought she had was slipping through her fingers. I felt the surge of betrayal and anger wash over me. Every evasive word, every half-truth she had ever spoken, now crystallized into a clear pattern. I realized that she had spent months thinking she could manipulate me, thinking my empathy and exhaustion made me weak. But that illusion shattered in that living room, replaced by cold, unrelenting determination. I leaned in, voice firm, eyes locking with hers. "This ends tonight. You're not going to play me any longer. I need to know where she is, and you will tell me." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she looked away again. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by my own ragged breathing. I knew in that moment that her silence wasn't just stubbornness, it was a weapon, a barrier I would have to dismantle. And even as my anger flared, the dread returned. If she wouldn't tell me, I would have to find my daughter without any guidance. Every second counted, and the unknown loomed like a shadow I couldn't shake. I sank into the couch, running my hands through my hair, replaying the past in my mind like a film I hadn't wanted to see. Little details I had ignored before now clicked into place. Her strange calls late at night, whispered conversations that fell silent when I entered the room. The way she avoided my questions with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Each memory pressed against me like evidence of a long, carefully woven deception, and the weight of it made my chest tighten. I remembered last winter, the night she insisted our daughter sleep over at a friend's house. I hadn't questioned it then. I trusted her. But now, thinking back, I realized how isolated our daughter had been becoming. Phone calls went unanswered, invitations ignored, friends subtly brushed off. My heart sank at the thought of how lonely she must have felt, how her trust had been manipulated, piece by piece, by the person who was supposed to protect her. The contrast between what our home had once been and what it had become was staggering. I recalled birthday mornings full of laughter and breakfast at the table, the warmth of hugs and bedtime stories. And now, that warmth had been replaced by fear, secrecy, and uncertainty. Every memory of normal clashed violently with the reality I faced, making the betrayal sting sharper. I picked up a small toy she had left on the floor, a miniature doll I used to tuck into bed alongside her, and turned it over in my hands. The thought that my daughter had been drifting further into her mother's manipulations without me noticing filled me with guilt and rage. The pieces of the puzzle were all here. The isolation, the secrecy, the subtle reshaping of our home around deception. As I sifted through the fragments of memory and the physical clues in the house, patterns emerged. Her lies had been layered carefully, designed to manipulate both our daughter and me. I realized how calculated it had been, how every small act of control had been a step toward this moment. And yet, beneath the anger, I felt a surge of clarity. I could see the path she had taken and, more importantly, the mistakes she had made that left openings for me to reclaim what she had taken. My emotions swirled, guilt for not noticing sooner, fear for our daughter, and a growing sense of urgency. Each flashback, each moment of clarity, fueled a determination I hadn't felt before. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was beginning to understand the breadth of her deception and the precise ways I could confront it. The puzzle was coming together, and the picture it revealed was ugly, but it was mine to solve. By the time I finally rose from the couch, the pieces of the puzzle felt tangible in my hands. I had a clearer sense of the danger, the betrayal, and the path forward. The dread was still there, but it was now paired with purpose. Every small detail I had overlooked before became a tool, a stepping stone toward reclaiming my daughter, exposing the lies, and taking back the home that had been stolen from me. I needed help, someone who could shed light on the darkness my wife had created. I thought of my sister-in-law, someone I had trusted for years, quietly observant and fiercely loyal. Hesitation gripped me. What if she was involved, even unknowingly? But the urgency left no room for doubt. I called her, voice tense, trying to keep calm as I explained, carefully omitting accusations until I could gauge her reaction. Her response was immediate, a mix of shock and concern. "I've noticed things too," she admitted. "Things that didn't make sense, small inconsistencies you wouldn't expect. I have some information, things she's been hiding for months." Relief surged through me, tempered by disbelief. Finally, someone who saw the truth and could help me navigate it. She shared details I had never imagined. Secret bank accounts, carefully orchestrated absences, and coded messages my wife had used to manipulate both me and our daughter. Each revelation landed like a weight lifting, revealing a pattern I could now trace and anticipate. For the first time since returning home, I felt a spark of control ignite. As she outlined the timeline and the hidden manipulations, clarity replaced panic. I realized that my wife's confidence in her secrecy had been her undoing. In relying on her allies and assuming my ignorance, She had left openings I could exploit. The power shift was undeniable. I was no longer entirely reactive. I could plan, anticipate, and reclaim authority in this unfolding battle. The sense of momentum was intoxicating, a stark contrast to the helplessness that had consumed me for hours. With this ally's insight, I began to map out the steps ahead, each move calculated and deliberate. The fear that had clung to me like a shadow started to ebb, replaced by a focused determination. I could see the path forward, and for the first time, I believed I could reach my daughter and expose the betrayal. I spent the next few hours pacing the house, every step fueled by a mix of fear and determination. The evidence my sister-in-law had shared swirled in my mind like pieces of a puzzle that demanded to be solved. My wife's arrogance had been consistent, predictable even. She believed she controlled every move, every word, every shadow in our home. That overconfidence became my weapon. I began plotting carefully, imagining each scenario, each reaction, each potential slip she might make if I orchestrated the situation just right. I laid out a plan in my head, step by step. I would create an environment that felt normal enough for her to let her guard down, but precise enough to expose the truth. Every detail mattered: the timing, the placement of documents, the subtle hints that I would drop to force her to reveal her own deception. I considered her personality, the way she thrived on manipulation, and designed traps tailored to her arrogance and need for control. The stakes felt enormous, but that only sharpened my focus. Every decision carried moral weight. I questioned myself constantly. Was I crossing a line? Was I risking my daughter's safety for the sake of retribution? But I reminded myself that the balance had long been tipped against us. The manipulation, the secrecy, the isolation of our child. It had to end, and the only way to do so was through strategy. I couldn't allow anger to blind me. Precision was paramount. I rehearsed conversations in my head, imagining her reactions to carefully placed questions and documents. Each hypothetical exchange allowed me to predict her lies, anticipate her excuses, and corner her into revealing what she had hidden. I plotted contingencies for every unexpected move, envisioning how I could adapt while keeping the upper hand. The adrenaline surged through me, heightening my senses, sharpening my focus. By the time night fell, the trap was set in my mind, every piece of evidence positioned in theory, every psychological maneuver calculated. I felt a rare mix of calm and exhilaration. The helplessness that had dominated my return home had dissipated, replaced by a controlled, deliberate sense of power. My wife's own miscalculations had given me the opening I needed, and I would use it to reclaim my daughter, expose the truth, and turn the tables in a way that she could never anticipate. I paused, staring at the basement door, the scene of the initial panic and fear. That same door, that same space, would now witness the reversal of control. I wasn't just planning to find my daughter. I was planning to reclaim our home, our life, and my dignity. Every decision was critical. Every move had to land perfectly. And as I prepared mentally for the confrontation, I felt a dangerous satisfaction. The kind that comes from knowing that justice was finally within reach, and that the moment of reckoning was coming. I could feel it before I even stepped into the room. Her energy had shifted. She knew I had pieced together enough to see through her carefully constructed facade. When I arrived at the family gathering, a subtle tension prickled the air, sharp and unmistakable. Her smile was tight, eyes darting nervously as if she were calculating every possible escape. But this time the calculation was mine to exploit. I didn't need to speak immediately. The unease on her face said everything. "Everyone, I think it's time we addressed a few things," I announced, my voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the room. My wife stiffened, her gaze locking on mine, flickering between fear and indignation. "What are you implying?" she asked, voice controlled but brittle, the slightest quiver betraying her composure. I stepped closer, presenting the evidence I had collected, the bank statements, the hidden messages, and the subtle manipulations that had left our daughter isolated. "I'm implying that the narrative you've been spinning, the games, the secrecy, it ends here," I said, letting my words hang like a verdict in the room. The murmurs grew louder. Friends and relatives shifted uneasily, watching the unraveling drama. Her face contorted in disbelief and anger. "You don't understand. I was only trying to protect everyone," she cried, a mix of desperation and arrogance in her tone. But the cracks were showing. Her allies, those who had once nodded and smiled at her schemes, now glanced at each other nervously, their loyalty faltering under the weight of exposure. I felt a surge of vindication. Her confidence had been her weapon, but in the public setting, it became her undoing. Each denial, each frantic explanation, only made her intentions more obvious, and as I methodically revealed the truth, one by one, those who had supported her silently began to step back. Their hesitation spoke volumes. They no longer believed her narrative. The room held its breath as she realized the momentum had shifted. The woman who had seemed untouchable, orchestrating events from behind the scenes, was now exposed, isolated, and vulnerable. Every glance from the crowd, every quiet murmur, reinforced the power reversal. I had predicted her overconfidence and leveraged it perfectly. As the tension reached its peak, I locked eyes with her one last time. She faltered, panic breaking through the arrogance she had carried so well until now. The first major victory was mine. Her allies were slipping away, her control evaporating, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of authority and clarity that had been absent since the night I returned home. The revelation wasn't just about the documents or messages. It was about the balance of power, now firmly in my hands, and as whispers spread through the room, I realized that the reckoning I had planned for so long was finally underway. The moment had come. I could feel it vibrating through the room before a single word was spoken. Everyone had gathered, unsuspecting of the storm that was about to break over what had once seemed like an ordinary family gathering. My wife stood at the center, radiant in her usual confidence, unaware that the foundation she had built so carefully was about to collapse. The documents I had collected, the testimonies of those who had witnessed her manipulations, the small but damning details, all were ready to be unveiled. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and stepped forward. "I think it's time the truth is heard," I said, letting my voice carry through the murmuring crowd. Gasps rippled around the room, and I saw her blink sharply, suddenly aware that her narrative was slipping from her grasp. The people she had counted on, family members who had supported her subtle manipulations, friends who had turned a blind eye, now looked at her with suspicion, hesitation, and incredulity. I laid out the evidence systematically. Bank statements showing hidden transfers, messages revealing secrets kept from me, incidents where she had isolated our daughter. Each detail was deliberate, calculated, undeniable. With every revelation, I could see the carefully constructed armor of her arrogance beginning to crack. The smile that once masked her manipulations faltered, replaced by defensiveness and rising panic. "Why would you do this?" she cried, her voice trembling despite the anger she tried to project. I could hear the fear behind the words, the desperation to maintain control. I didn't answer. The facts spoke for themselves. Every whisper, every sideways glance in the room confirmed her unraveling authority. She had underestimated me, underestimated the very people who had once followed her lead, and that mistake was proving fatal. One by one, witnesses I had quietly prepared to speak came forward. Friends recounted minor incidents she had manipulated to her advantage. Relatives confirmed inconsistencies she had tried to cover up. The room shifted into chaos around her, voices overlapping, exposing the full extent of her deception. I felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and anger swelling inside me. Satisfaction, because justice was unfolding exactly as I had anticipated. Anger, because of the months of manipulation, the sleepless nights, the fear and uncertainty she had imposed on my daughter and me. I caught sight of my daughter, standing at the edge of the gathering, uncertain but curious. Relief surged through me. She was safe. She had seen the truth unfold, and now she understood, in ways words alone could not convey, the power of standing up, of reclaiming what is right. My wife's defenses crumbled completely. Her voice lost volume, her posture slumped, and the smugness that had once shielded her from scrutiny vanished. Family members, previously hesitant, now confronted her directly, demanding explanations, and her lies faltered under the collective weight of accountability. Karma, long delayed, was arriving in full force, and I felt it in my bones. The justice I had fought to orchestrate was real and visible. Even as the chaos swirled around her, I remained calm, absorbing the moment, letting the mixture of anger, relief, and vindication wash over me. Every whispered excuse she offered fell flat. Every attempt to justify herself was met with disbelief and scorn. I had planned this meticulously, and now, watching it unfold, I felt a cold satisfaction. The truth was undeniable, and the power had shifted completely. By the end, the room was silent, tense, and charged with a sense of finality. My wife stood exposed, alone, facing a reality she hadn't anticipated. And in that moment, I realized that while the anger would fade, the relief and the justice, the full emotional reckoning, would stay with me forever. The public exposure was complete, and the balance of power had been restored. I finally found her curled up in the corner of the playroom, small and trembling, clutching a worn stuffed bear like a lifeline. The relief that surged through me was overwhelming, but I forced myself to stay calm, kneeling down to meet her at eye level. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice soft but steady. "I'm here. You're safe now." Her eyes, wide with fear and confusion, searched mine as if trying to reconcile the father she knew with the events that had unfolded. Why did she do that?" she asked, voice quivering. I reached out, pulling her into a careful hug, letting her bury her face against my chest. "Sometimes people make terrible choices," I said gently. "But you didn't do anything wrong. You're not to blame for what happened." She hesitated, then wrapped her small arms around me, seeking comfort and trust. I could feel the tension leave her body slowly, like a rope being untied knot by knot. "I was so scared," she admitted, her voice muffled. I thought you wouldn't find me." I stroked her hair, holding her closer, letting her know through touch that the fear was ending, that we were reclaiming what had been stolen from her. As she calmed, I reflected on the stark contrast between the home we had lost to deceit and the one we were beginning to rebuild. Before, the house had been a labyrinth of manipulation, whispers, and fear. Now it was a place of safety, openness, and trust. Every corner seemed to breathe relief instead of tension, every room a reminder that we were taking back control, together. I encouraged her to talk, to express the confusion and anger she had felt, letting the emotions flow without judgment. "It's okay to be mad," I told her. "It's okay to be upset. What she did wasn't fair, and it's normal to feel hurt." Her tears flowed freely, and I held her, letting the emotions wash through us both. In that raw honesty, a bond strengthened, a shared understanding forming in the space where fear had once dominated. Through small moments of dialogue, I guided her gently toward reassurance and healing. "We're safe now," I repeated, letting the words anchor both of us. "We have each other, and nothing can take that away." Her small nods and tentative smiles reminded me that even in the shadow of betrayal, recovery was possible. The journey ahead would require patience, but the first step, reuniting and reaffirming trust, was complete. In that quiet, tender space, I realized how far we had come. From fear, isolation, and manipulation, we were moving toward safety, clarity, and emotional restoration. And as we sat together, wrapped in shared relief, I knew this was the turning point, the moment where before ended and after began, where the chaos of betrayal gave way to the promise of healing and reclaimed family bonds. The days that followed were a blur of conversations, explanations, and confrontations with extended family and friends. Some were shocked, some defensive, and others quietly relieved that the truth had finally come to light. I spent hours recounting events, clarifying what had happened, and witnessing the reactions of those who had unknowingly supported her schemes. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but necessary. The truth had a way of forcing reflection, and I realized just how deeply her manipulations had penetrated our circle. I thought about the months of subtle lies, the isolation of our daughter, and the emotional games that had left me doubting myself. The anger still burned beneath the surface, but it had transformed into clarity. I could see where I had been blind, where I had allowed trust to cloud judgment, and where the cracks in our family dynamics had been exploited. That awareness carried a strange sense of empowerment, as though the very lessons learned from betrayal had fortified my ability to protect those I loved. Some family members expressed regret, acknowledging that they had overlooked signs or failed to intervene. Others needed time, hesitant to reconcile but willing to witness the consequences of deceit firsthand. I listened patiently, understanding that healing was not immediate and that trust, once fractured, required consistent effort to rebuild. In quiet moments, I reflected on the emotional journey, the fear, the confusion, the rush of adrenaline during confrontations, and the ultimate relief of reclaiming my daughter. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also illuminated truths about resilience, intuition, and the strength found in facing deception head-on. I felt a new sense of agency, the knowledge that I could navigate complex emotional landscapes without losing myself or my family. Even as the tension began to ease, there was a lingering weight, a reminder that our lives had been altered irrevocably. But with that weight came perspective. I understood the depth of human manipulation, the fragility of trust, and the value of vigilance. The aftermath was not just about recovery, it was about growth, awareness, and the quiet, steady reclamation of control. Sitting with my daughter, seeing her smile again, and feeling the slow return of peace in our home, I recognized that the journey was ongoing. Yet I also knew that we had emerged stronger, more connected, and armed with the knowledge that even in the face of profound betrayal, we could reclaim our lives and move forward with purpose and clarity. The final step was ensuring that the justice we had fought for would endure. I met with legal counsel, laying out the evidence we had meticulously gathered. Bank statements, hidden communications, and documented manipulations, all of it painted a clear picture of deceit and endangerment. For the first time, I felt that the weight of months of fear and uncertainty could be translated into tangible consequences, and the sense of empowerment it brought was intoxicating. I attended court hearings, presenting the evidence calmly, letting the facts speak for themselves. My wife's attempts to deflect, manipulate, or gaslight were futile under the scrutiny of legal authority. Each objection she raised faltered, exposed by the thoroughness of the documentation and the credibility of the witnesses who had finally stepped forward. With every procedural victory, the tension that had gripped me for months began to ease, replaced by a steady, growing relief. Her arrogance, once a shield, became her downfall. The legal system, combined with the social exposure she had already endured, left her isolated and accountable. I watched as the consequences unfolded: restrictions, restitution, and mandated steps to rectify the harm she had caused. The satisfaction wasn't just in seeing her punished. It was in reclaiming control, restoring balance, and safeguarding my daughter's well-being. Beyond the courtroom, I reasserted my presence in the family and social circles. Invitations, trust, and respect had once been eroded by her schemes, but now they returned, reinforced by clarity and the undeniable truth of her betrayal. I navigated interactions with calm authority, setting boundaries that ensured no one could manipulate or undermine us again. The contrast between the powerless, anxious man I had been and the deliberate, controlled version of myself now standing before the world was striking. I reflected on the lessons learned, the resilience required, and the importance of vigilance. Betrayal had tested me in ways I never imagined, but it had also revealed my capacity to protect, strategize, and reclaim what mattered most. The catharsis was profound. Months of fear, anger, and uncertainty had culminated in an unambiguous sense of justice and empowerment. As I held my daughter close, watching her laughter return and feeling the home settle into a semblance of normalcy, I knew this was more than victory, it was closure. The storm had passed, leaving clarity, strength, and the enduring knowledge that truth, strategy, and perseverance could triumph over manipulation and deceit. The chapter of betrayal was closed, but the story of resilience and reclaimed life was only beginning. Sitting alone in the quiet of our home, I let the weight of everything settle around me. The adrenaline of confrontation and legal victory had faded, leaving a stillness that was both comforting and heavy. I thought about the months of betrayal, the sleepless nights at my mother's bedside, and the endless uncertainty about my daughter's safety. The cost had been immense, not just in stress and fear, but in trust that could never fully return to its original state. I reflected on the lessons embedded in the pain. Vigilance, I realized, was not just a precaution, it was a necessity. The subtle manipulations I had once overlooked were glaring in hindsight, each a reminder that awareness and intuition are powerful tools in protecting the ones you love. Yet alongside the bitterness of betrayal, there was growth. I had discovered reserves of patience, strategy, and emotional resilience I hadn't known I possessed. Looking at my daughter playing quietly in the next room, I felt both pride and sorrow. Pride for the strength we had both shown, for the courage to confront deception and reclaim our life. Sorrow for the innocence lost, the trust that had been tested, and the scars that would linger, subtle but lasting. Life would never be exactly the same, and I would carry the memory of this ordeal with me as both a warning and a guide. Even as I processed the complexity of emotions, I felt empowerment. The betrayal that had once rendered me powerless had ultimately forged a clarity of mind and strength of character that I could not have gained otherwise. I knew now that resilience isn't just surviving, it's reclaiming control, setting boundaries and moving forward with intention, even when the past casts a shadow. The bittersweet nature of the experience lingered, a mix of relief and melancholy. We had reclaimed our home, restored safety, and ensured justice, yet the echoes of what had been endured remained. And in that reflection, I found a sense of balance. The pain had shaped me, but it had not broken me. The story of betrayal had ended, but the story of growth, vigilance, and reclaimed life was only beginning. I took a deep breath, letting the quiet settle around me, knowing that the scars of betrayal would always exist as a reminder, but so would the empowerment, resilience, and lessons that had carried us through. Life was fragile, trust was precious, and we had emerged stronger, wiser, cautious, but capable of facing whatever came next with confidence and clarity.